We will call to order the meeting of the Chicago Board of Election Commissioners for Thursday, April 23rd, 2015. Good morning, everyone. My name is Langdon Neal. I'm chairman of the board. Seated to my left is Commissioner Marisol Hernandez. And I'd like to sadly take note of the passing of our third commissioner, Richard Cowen, on Sunday night. I've known Richard for almost 30 years and served with him here and at the State Board of Election, and truly will miss him, his advice, counsel, wisdom, his guidance, and he served the public for almost 30 years in the election business. So we could just have a moment of reflection upon his life. Thank you. Okay, we will consider the first item on the agenda this morning, and the only item, and that is the consideration of tabulated statement of returns and proclamation of results of the canvass of the election returns for the April 7th, 2015 municipal runoff and supplementary aldermanic elections held in the city of Chicago. And you have those before you. Is there a motion to approve and proclaim the results of the April 7th, 2015 election?
Motion to approve and adopt.
Moved by Commissioner Hernandez. I'll second. Further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The results are proclaimed. That is all we have today for our regular business. I see we have quite a few guests. Anyone that would like to speak to us? We don't have a public section on our agenda, but we are always available to hear from the public if they'd like to speak to us today. Yes, sir.
My name is Don Olson. First of all, my sympathies to the family and friends of Mr. Cowen.
Thank you, Mr. Olson.
My name is Don Olson, and I am a poll watcher. And I poll watched in this last election round in February and April. And I poll watched as in early voting poll watching, and I poll watched in nursing home poll watching, and on election day, and also in post-election poll watching at the Board of Elections. I also helped coordinate poll watchers in February and in April in the 33rd Ward.
Thank you for your service.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
You're welcome. I also circulated petitions for candidates. So I did a lot of things that involved things that the Board of Elections oversees. And I poll watched for 3 different candidates and for 1 civic organization, Illinois Ballot Integrity. But today I'm here to speak on behalf of, and I have my poll watcher credential here too. I'm speaking on behalf of today, it says here, Ms. Common Sense. And I'm sure it would surprise a few people in the room that Common Sense is a woman. So, all my remarks today are to serve the agenda of common sense. Here are some things I learned from all the poll watching I did. First of all, I learned that open and honest elections are dependent on how observable an election is and whether or not it is observed. And how open or honest an election is in direct proportion to that. How observable is it? And I realize that poll watchers are crucial to that process. They are the ones who are observing the process as it actually happens. There are other checks and balances on the system, but it's poll watchers who are actually there when the voting's taking place. They're the ones who are allowed to challenge a signature or challenge a procedure that's happening. So poll watchers are really crucial to this system. The other thing I learned is that poll watchers, contrary to the opinions of some election judges and other people, poll watchers are not the enemy. They're a crucial part of the system, and the system should be designed to accommodate poll watchers. And it should be designed, it should be inherent in the system that it's observable. That's not just something that should be tacked on the end when everything else is done. It's inherent to the process. So there are two issues, observability and efficiency. Of course, the public wants this process to be efficient, but not at the expense of it being open and honest. And if there's ever a conflict between those two, openness and honesty should win out over efficiency. Efficiency should then, of course, follow. But another thing I observed about this whole process is it's too complicated. Nobody really understands the whole process. Even the people who are heads of departments in the Board of Elections have trouble understanding everything about this process. So I think we need to streamline the process. By streamlining it, we'll make it more efficient, but at the same time, we'll also make it more observable. The complexity makes it very difficult to observe it. We've got 12 days of early voting, we've got election day, and we've got 12 days after election. Well, that adds up to 25 days. To have a poll watcher needs to take the month off of work to be able to actually poll watch one of our elections. So it's too much, it's too elaborate. There are too many events. So clarity and observability are what earn an election the right to call itself open and honest. And I think it's important that the Board of Elections realize that the process needs to not only be open and honest, but it needs to appear open and honest. You know, above reproach, all of that. And only then can the public have confidence that the process is fair. So I just want to give you a few examples of a few things. You know, I've got a long list. I'm not going to do the long list today.
You can give us the
I want to give you a few highlights of things that I think need to be changed. One is in the area of ballot access. The rule that citizens can only sign one petition in a given race causes all sorts of havoc. That should be changed.
And you realize, Mr. Olson, that we are an administrative body. We don't make the law. We just administer the
Okay,
law.
well, some of the things I'm asking for require changes in procedure, and some require changes in law.
Okay.
And sometimes I'm not sure what the difference is. So I'll give you an example of, in this last election, in the post-election period, I pushed for more openness and open absentee ballots. And I asked that poll watchers be allowed to look at the postmarks on the ballots and that they be allowed to challenge signatures. I had this conversation with Mr. Scanlon, and he discussed it with me in terms of that he had the power, as he does, to interpret the law as he deems appropriate. And so our conversation was in terms of rules and regulations of the Board of Elections. But this past week, I had a conversation with Mr. Allen, who told me that in the future, the Board of Elections would not be doing this because there was no provision in the law for poll watchers to be part of this process. So apparently, even within the Board of Elections, there's some difference of opinion possibly about whether this is a procedural change or a change in the law. I think that phrase, no provision in the law, is very interesting though, because there is no provision in the law for many things that the Board of Elections does. I would imagine there's no provision in the law for the use of paper clips in your offices. Yet you still use paper clips. And I'm not calling for a ban on the use of paper clips because there's no provision in the law. Okay, so that being said, ballot access. Voters should be able to sign more than one petition. And we need to clean up this process because really it's an embarrassment. These expensive court cases, the things people go through just to get on the ballot. In the 33rd Ward where I live, we had a candidate, Tyler Solorio, who was the only Hispanic candidate in our race, in a ward that's 52% Hispanic. So he was challenged by Deb Mehel. He got 821 signatures, and I know that he got them. He was working off of voter lists going door to door. They were legitimate signatures. He was challenged, and at a certain point just had to give up the challenge process. He's a 25-year-old student at DePaul University. He had to give it up because he didn't have the money to pay for the legal help to get on the ballot. But when you only need 473 signatures to get on the ballot, and with 821 you can't make it, that's a problem. And that really limited the choice of the people of the 33rd Ward.
Again, that's a legislative issue.
So-
We have to follow the law. And in many instances, we don't disagree with you. We do what we can to streamline the
Well,
process.
certainly the board would be very influential
Oh,
in changing
we
laws.
comment and suggest legislation every session.
Here's another one, provisional ballots. Right now, if they are, if you vote in the correct ward with the wrong precinct, your vote is only counted in citywide elections. In other words, if you vote in the wrong precinct in your ward, your vote for alderman doesn't count. That should be changed. If you're in the right ward, and you should be able to vote for your own
Yeah,
alderman.
that's a legislative issue. That's a state board, actually, a state board interpretation, isn't it?
The election code provides for partial ballots. It specifies the offices for which a provisional ballot will be counted and won't be counted. It left it to the state board to develop and adopt
Correct.
rules. And in the new bill, Public Act 1171, which will take effect June 1, the General Assembly essentially codified
Yeah.
into the election code the regulations that the state board had previously adopted.
Yes.
So it's now in the election
It's
code.
now an election.
Correct.
Another item, and I'm sure this is a change in the law as well, is write-in votes. As voters understand write-ins, if you write in someone's name, that vote will be counted. But of course, that's not the case. You have to be, in Chicago, you have to be a registered write-in, which means you have to have registered with the Board of Elections for your write-in votes to count. So people, voters are thinking they're voting for someone by writing them in, but they're not. And they don't know that. There's a general understanding across the country that write-in votes are counted, and I think that needs to be changed. Early voting lasts too long, and it doesn't really serve its purpose. The purpose of it was to get more people to vote, but the numbers haven't really gone up that significantly.
Oh, no, that's not correct.
Well, I would
That's
say that
factually incorrect.
Total participation.
It's not correct either, but
I would say that early voting should be changed so that it's the 2 weekends before the election, when people are really available, not 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, but Saturday and Sunday and the 2 weekends before the election.
well, you're, Mr. Olson, you realize that may seem logical to you, but to someone else who works a different schedule and has families, you know, everybody doesn't have the same schedule that you may have, so.
Well, most people are available sometime on the weekend. And of course, there's always absentees if you really can't, you know, I mean, but to have 13 days of election is really excessive, in my opinion.
Well, thank you for that, but I'm going to disagree with you on that one, so that's okay.
Absentee ballots are still a problem. They've been a problem in the past. They were a problem in the November election. They're still a problem. I believe that poll watchers should be able to check the postmarks, and they should also be able to challenge signatures, period. I believe that is true in the rest of Cook County, but not true in the city of Chicago. And
Can I
that
just
question
comment
of
on that?
post-
Yeah, okay, yeah. So let's
Because I know Mr. Olson and I had a conversation about this earlier. And I think Mr. Olson is directing his remarks to the absentee ballots that are counted in-house. And I think he believes that poll watchers should have the right to object to those signatures. The election code in section 19-8, I believe, is clear that now all absentee ballots are counted in the central office of the election authority. And it provides that, you know, poll watchers have the right to observe, but unlike when absentee ballots used to be counted in the precinct polling places, poll watchers no longer have the right to object to signatures.
Correct.
Now, they have the right to observe it. And I know, and I see Mr. Mullen here, Ed Mullen, who was a poll watcher and a representative for several candidates in this election, and was there to observe much of what we did post-election. And I think he would agree with me that, you know, we have a process where the signatures of the voter on the certificate envelope is compared with the signature of the voter in his voter registration card, that's brought up using a machine we call the Agilis machine that's brought up, and they can observe it, and they did observe it. But the statute, reserves the right to the election official to make the determination whether the signatures match or don't match, and that's essentially our call. But they certainly were given the opportunity to observe it, to make whatever notes they wanted to make concerning that, and to preserve whatever rights they felt they had with regard to signatures.
We had a number of observers for certain candidates and
Yes, we did.
organizations this last election.
It's not just observing it, judgment.
Okay, wait, let's just deal with public comment. So Mr. Olson's got the floor.
Okay.
But you can wrap it up, Mr. Olson.
I will, yeah.
Yeah.
The problem I have with that is that on election day, there's an application that the voter signs, and then that's checked with the polling book. And poll watchers have the right to see both of those signatures and to challenge them. So if we don't do that in the Board of Elections, there are two different standards for how ballots are treated. And to me, that's a problem, and that's a legal problem, with two different standards.
Yeah.
Bush v. Gore addressed that problem in 2000.
And again, the distinction there is, first of all, the election code preserves the right of poll watchers to challenge signatures in the polling place. But it's important to remember that the voter's there.
Right.
The voter is present in the polling place when he or she goes to vote. If that voter's signature is challenged, he has the right there to defend himself.
Correct.
And produce identification to prove his identity, to complete an affidavit, and then vote. Unlike the polling place on election day, when we get absentee ballots coming in through the mail, the voter's not there. The voter's not there. So there is, the facts are distinguishable, and I think that's why we have, why the election code has set up two different processes.
But there is a comparable process in place. If the people checking the signatures on an absentee application find the signature is not acceptable, the voter is informed by mail and given the opportunity to come down to the Board of Elections and validate their signature. So the processes are very identical except for the role of poll watchers. So I've got a problem with that. Here's another thing, total ballots cast. You have a procedure where you look at three numbers. The number of total ballots cast that the judges say happened in their polling place, and then you have the number of the central computer, and then you have the number that appears on the consolidated tape. And I believe your policy is if those numbers don't coincide, it's the consolidated tape that should rule as the definitive total ballots cast. My problem especially comes in the area, and this happened quite a bit in the 33rd Ward, where the judges said that fewer ballots were cast than the machines said. Now the judges are actually taking applications for each person who walks in the door, signs their name, and they put it on their application spindle. And the number that they put on line 3 of Form 80 is the final number on that last application. So it's very odd that it happens with alarming regularity that the number that the machine says is greater than the number that the judges say. If I were going to choose between those two numbers, I think the more reliable one would be the judge's number of how many ballots were cast in that polling place on election day.
That could be subject to human error at all times, so that's...
And just a couple more things.
Yeah.
I think that the machines, the touchscreen machines, are problematic. They have all sorts of dysfunction. They stop working in the polling places. They're a problem. And in the interest of streamlining the system, I think that having two systems of voting, paper ballot and machines, is ridiculous. We should pick one and go with it, and I think the one we should go with is the paper ballots, because there's a more definite trail that can be counted and recounted if necessary. And the final point is, and this perhaps is the most important one of all, the training of election judges. We need to do a better job training our election judges. I've encountered great election judges, and I've encountered absolutely horrendous election judges. I was in a nursing home where there were 8 election judges, and the judges told me, as a poll watcher, that I absolutely needed to stand 100 feet away from the person of any election judge. And all 8 of them assented to this. I needed to stand 100 feet away. There were 2 investigators from the Board of Elections there who had never seen the pink book, the Judge of Election Handbook for Nursing Homes, who agreed that whatever the judges said is right because they're the experts. There was also a representative from the state's attorney there who said, 100 feet, you'd have to be standing outside the building to be 100 feet away. So here, all these 10 people from the Board of Elections decided that I needed to stand 100 feet away. Those judges also had a big problem doing the tally at the end of the day, and they asked me to help them add a list of figures that totaled 70 ballots. They didn't do it on their own. They asked me, and they had to do it about 3 or 4 times before they finally came up with a list of figures that added up to 70. And all they were.
Have you been an election judge, Mr. Olson?
I have not.
I would encourage you.
I've read the book, though.
I know you're very knowledgeable. I would encourage you to sign up to be an election judge, go through the training, and then come back and tell me what really, once you've experienced what it means to go through training and try to digest what is now a monumental task for our part-time, really public service. It's really public service. They're paid a stipend, I would call it now. To be an election judge, you'll understand the enormity of the training issue and the education issue and the whole issue of serving as an election judge. And I'd be curious to see what you'd have to say.
You're feeding into my argument here.
Oh, I'm not just, no, absolutely. Oh, there's no disagreement here at all. I'm agreeing with many of your points. I'm just trying to add a perspective to you that I think that would be valuable.
What I'm really calling for with the election judges is that there be a test, not just training, but you should have to pass a test. They actually do this in the rest of Cook County, but we don't do it in the city of Chicago. There should be a test. These 8 judges at this nursing home I was at, not one of them should be an election judge ever again. I mean, they had problems with their math skills. They had problems with their reading skills. They actually pointed out to me in the pink book where it said that I needed to stand 100 feet away. And they cited a point that said there shall be no electioneering within 100 feet of the polling place.
So you realize, Mr. Olson, that during a certain period of time, we must, by law, accept the judges that are referred to us by the political parties.
That's why I think the Board of Elections needs to do a better job of recruiting competent judges.
Well, but we can't recruit those. We have to take whoever they give us. And then, after that period, if there is a shortage, and there always is, because we have 17,000 judges roughly, then we get to go what's called over-the-counter, which means those are our recruited judges. But again, this is a legislative process.
Because committeemen could only nominate people who had passed the test.
Yeah.
So finally, why am I standing here today? And finally, I've gotten to the point. I'm calling for a public commission to study these procedures and these laws. Exactly how this should be made up is open to discussion, but I would especially like to ask the press to take an active part in this, educating the public and calling for this commission. This is the perfect time to do this because we have a change of administration now in the Board of Elections. This is the perfect time to have such a commission and to reconsider all the laws and all the procedures of this institution.
So thank you for your comments, Mr. Olson.
Just one final remark.
Yes.
And that is, it was interesting to me that within the past few days, I've been asked by 2 people who are very high up in this process. They asked me the same question. They said, well, with all your concerns, you're not really saying that you think that elections have been thrown, that elections have been stolen because of all these problems. And my answer to that was, yes, I do. And I think it's happened in this last election process. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Mr. Olson. I appreciate it. I'll just say for the record, also that we did a forum in which we brought together. Jim, why don't you just summarize what we did a year ago or 2 years ago?
Well, a couple of items that go directly to what Mr. Olson was discussing. We had probably the biggest voter focus gathered at the UIC forum and essentially looked at ways in which we could improve our operations, pursue changes in the law, and make voting more easy and accessible. I might point out also that this recent election, you can look at Miami, New York, LA, Houston, Minneapolis, one of the more progressive same-day registration towns, Milwaukee, same-day registration, Indianapolis, Des Moines. Our turnouts for the municipal election, 41%, none of them even come close to that. We tend to beat ourselves up when we're only at 34 or 41%. But in fact, all these other major metropolitan cities, when they have municipal elections, whether other big cities or other Midwestern cities, they have 19, 20, 26% turnout. Sometimes 8, 10% turnout. So we do have an engaged electorate. We did listen to them, and they came back to us with recommendations that we pursue online registration. We did, and it's here. That we pursue same-day registration. We did. We had a pilot program last November. It's coming back to all 2,069 precincts starting March 2016. So we took their ideas, online access to ballots, not online voting, but online delivery of the ballots to our military overseas voters. We pursued a federal grant, won it, and we offer that now. We deliver that to our military overseas voters. Lastly, they also called for vote centers, universal vote centers, somewhat like you see during early voting. Anyone can go to any polling place. And they were saying we ought to do this for election day. Ideally, that's one of the reasons we pursued several technological changes as well. We pursued the electronic poll book to add security to the system. We were the first major jurisdiction in the state of Illinois to deploy electronic poll books in every precinct in our jurisdiction, period. The first. And the electronic poll books add security to the system by flagging each record of every voter who may have used early or absentee voting, so there's no more stickers on pieces of paper. And secondly, they offer our election judges a powerful tool, the ability to search all 1.4 million records and help the people who arrived in the wrong polling place to avoid the very situation that you described, which was the provisional ballot cast in the wrong precinct. We're with you. We're with you on that. We are trying to give our judges the tools and the equipment, the hardware that they've never had before. They used to have a paper poll book with 600 records. And if you were from outside of the precinct, we had no idea what to do as judges. So we provide more information than we ever had before on the internet. We provide our election judges with better tools. We're trying to get people to the right polling place so that their full ballot counts. We're offering online registration now, and in the future, same-day registration. Our turnouts are better than anywhere else in the United States. Can we do better? Yes. But lastly, we are in agreement with you on the other technological issue you raised about streamlining the system to have one balloting system. We have an infrastructure report that I can get to you that covered electronic poll books. We went to our city, our county, and we're looking for funding. The problem is we don't have another Help America Vote Act right now to finance this transition to newer equipment. We're in agreement that this equipment is on its last legs. We're in 100% agreement, and we would like to go to one simplified system. Is the funding there? Look what's happening right now with our city and our county finances and our state's finances.
But I'm sure
That's the challenge. That's the challenge we have.
Elections are important to spend money on.
Oh, yes.
Well, we're in agreement, but as we've told other audience members who said, you need to move up to newer equipment, we'd welcome your support when we go before the city council and the county board. We do want to go to a more modern balloting system, but the funding right now is not there. We're hopeful, crossing our fingers, that we can make a transition to that in the near future. But right now, you're right. The system isn't as solid as we'd like.
We should also, Jim, give Mr. Olson our report on our community forum. That the lawyers for, what's the title, the lawyers for constitutional rights?
Chicago Lawyers for Civil Rights under the law.
Chicago Lawyers for Civil Rights under the law, that Ruth Greenwood and her organization produced a very comprehensive report which summarized our process. We have a video of it also, don't we? It was our community forum that opened it up to over 100 organizations and produced a report and findings of what the community organizations and the civic groups suggested for us along the line that you talked about. We'd like to share that with you. That was a couple years ago. It's something that I think we found very, very useful. So,
In response to Mr. Allen, I would just like to say that a lot of the things you mentioned, some of them I agree with, some of them I don't. But they all basically involve issues of efficiency. But some of those items, when you make something more efficient, you don't necessarily make it more open and honest. And there are problems with openness and honesty that come up because of some of those changes, those items that you talked about.
I would frankly disagree with you. The electronic poll books flag the records to protect against double voting. I can't simplify ballot
Like I said,
security
some-
more than that.
I'm-
That's not a
I have
matter
no
of
problem with the
efficiency.
electronic poll.
And
Well-
your issue was about getting people to the right polling place, making sure their ballot counts. We're in agreement with that. The electronic poll book, it's not about efficiency, it's about getting persons to the right polling place. So I understand your take on it. I respectfully disagree.
okay. Thank you, Mr. Olson. We valued your comments and
Can
they
we
were
have
very
another
helpful to us.
public comment?
Yes, absolutely. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Yeah. Give us your name and.
Yeah, Dr. Laura Chamberlain.
Okay.
And been
Dr.
working with-
Chamberlain.
Yep,
It's
Dr.
been a
Laura.
while since you've been here.
Yeah, I'm following it very closely.
Okay.
We have a lot of friends now.
Good.
So we welcome the voter forum that you had, okay? And that was about encouraging voting and making voting more accessible to the voter, which is great. But I would encourage you to have another forum, and that is with the candidates and their poll watchers who actually observe the election. See, the problem is the voters that just come in and vote, they don't observe the entire election because it's impossible to observe the entire election. Only when you have a campaign can you do that. And that's when you start to see where the holes are in the system. So I would encourage you to have another forum for the candidates and their poll watchers and their campaigns to talk about the problems that they access, like the electronic poll book. We agree that it has definitely assisted to a great degree. But did you know there's a glitch in your electronic poll books? And if you, I personally witnessed it over 10 times in the past election, 10 different precincts, where a voter would come in and they were not on the first screen for the precinct. And election judges would have to do the city search, and then they would find the person's name and they would find that they were in fact in the precinct. So there's a little glitch. And only if the election judge would hit that city search. Now, do you know how many times as a poll watcher in the last election I had to encourage the election judges to hit the city search? Sir? Dozens. Because for some reason, they just don't want to do that. Because they're not trained well enough.
Well, it takes, as I said, the electronic poll books are new. Judges are still.
So what
Through the learning
we're
process,
asking for is a high-level forum about the real glitches in the election, the real holes, the real problems. And that comes from the candidates and their campaigns, their poll watchers, the people that spent, 2 to 3 weeks watching these elections and observing the post-election canvassing.
Can we call it, if we agree to do it, can we call it how to improve elections and not glitches in the election?
Perfect.
Yeah,
Perfect.
I like that a little better. We're not-
We would like that
Okay,
too.
okay. Anyone else who would like to speak to us? All right. Thank you all for coming down. We value your comments. We appreciate them. You are our partners. We're all in this together to try to get it, improve it, and get it right. So thank you for your comments, and we encourage you to come down and speak to us. We'd like to get you, Mr. Olson, those documents so you can at least review them and then critique them. We'd like your input on it. And I'd like you to be a judge sometime, because after you become a judge, then you'd really probably have a lot of comments for me.
How about if I'm a commissioner?
Yay!
Would you like to see? It's
We don't
available.
have to
Should I
take
pick up
yours.
right now?
Not yet,
Go out
not
for a
yet,
cup of coffee.
not yet, not yet. The screen door hasn't hit me on the way out yet. All righty,
Motion to adjourn?
thank you. I
Thank you
will
so much.
second it. All those in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.